One might easily believe that Dudley Simpson emerged from the all-synthesizer scoring of Season 8, having not only survived, but thrived. To be more realistic, whatever didn't kill him, didn't kill him. Executing a score by synthesizer was painstaking and time-consuming in 1971, even with the help of radiophonic workshoppers like Brian Hodgson. By the next year, synthesizer technology had advanced enough to make its use more practical, but Simpson seems anxious to return to his late 60s style, mixing traditional and electronic instruments. Simpson's music of Season 9, typified in The Time Monster, is still largely synthesized, but augmented with just a touch of percussion, notably vibraphone, timpani, and cymbals. Although his music of Season 10 further merges real instruments with synthesizers, the score to The Three Doctors is very much in the Season 9 vein. As I mentioned, there are three musical segments that comprise the Bessie suite. One from The Time Monster and the other two from The Three Doctors. Even after my initial transcriptions, I knew that the original clip from The Time Monster made the best ending. It was self-contained, with beginning, middle, and end, in comparison to the other segments which trailed off as the action took over. Because the melody of the first Three Doctors clip is a near facsimile of the Time Monster melody, I knew it should go first, with the contrasting second clip bridging the two segments. Without a doubt, Bessie is a jolly, jaunty jalopy, reflected in the fast tempo and bouncing cut time rhythm. The term cut time really means a double time feel, and is notated the same way as 4/4 common time, just felt a little differently. This was the first transcription I did that reflected Simpson's soon-to-be ubiquitous habit of composing at 1 beat, 2 beats, or whatever multiple per second. This convenience of 120 beats per minute allowed him to write exactly the right amount of music for a however many seconds scene. This took advantage of the post-production process I discussed in the last episode. The opening segment from episode 1 of The Three Doctors accompanies the Doctor and Joe's return to unit headquarters after investigating a strange disappearance, and ends as they emerge from Bessie only to be threatened by a multicolored pixelated antimatter creature that has emerged from a drain in the car park. Our two heroes escape, but poor Bessie is not so lucky. The creature envelops her, and she disappears. Beginning with a quick timpani roll, the left-hand accompaniment reflects both the downbeat bass line of the synthesizer and also bouncing upbeats by the cymbal. Starting with a 2-bar pattern, which will shortly be developed, the bass line switches to a simple 1-5-1-5 alternation for the rest of the phrase. The irrepressibly jolly melody of the first phrase is made entirely of the D major pentatonic scale, a 5-note scale using only the most consonant notes of the major scale. This is a truly universal sound, heard in indigenous and folk music throughout the world. Starting from a high D natural, the melody flutters down and down in continuous 8th notes until it reaches its ending D, 4 octaves lower. Virtually without pause, the melody skyrockets in 16th notes back up to the starting D natural through a white key arpeggio played with alternating hands. This sounds to me fancifully almost as if the synthesizer designed it, rather than Simpson. I can imagine it solving the math problem of getting from low D to high D in 1.5 beats time. As a transition between the two melodic phrases of this segment, we get a 2-measure series of rising harmonies, played as 4-note chords in the left hand and an octave in the right hand. Each harmony adds up to the same type, dominant 7th, sharp 9. A third, concluding measure, vacillates between 2 adjacent sharp 9 harmonies. The second, more ominous melodic phrase is centered on F sharp minor, but mostly in the Phrygian mode that directly relates it to D major. The bass line again starts with, but this time continues, the 2-bar pattern began in the first phrase. This line is made further ominous by its use of the tritone B sharp rather than the perfect fifth C sharp. Simpson reflects this change in his melody, allowing B sharp to resolve in an expected way, but the bass line never does. Like the initial D major phrase, this F sharp minor phrase falls 4 octaves before it lands. This time, as it lands, the bass line joins with it, concluding unresolved on what could be the leading tone of F sharp. I'm going to use it as a pivot note to connect with the slight change of character in the second segment to come. In episode 2 of that same story, the Doctor and Joe have been transported to Omega's quarry, universe of antimatter, and besides finding other bits and bobs that the creature has mistakenly sent there, they find the old girl safe and sound. Driving off, a hideous gel guard, another of Omega's creatures, watches them depart. The bass line of this new segment starts again on D, but follows the 2-bar tritone pattern of the previous F sharp minor phrase. The new melody, now in D minor, with a little more chromaticism, is rhythmically inconsistent in its 8th notes, unwinding unexpectedly as it flutters down. Just before the melody reaches its 4-octave range, it's cut short of that goal while again joining with the bass line, resolving to the 4-chord G minor. Using the same slightly thicker bass timbre heard in the Keller Machine suite, this transition between the 2 melodic phrases is a chromatically rising bass combined with a subtler, quieter harmony above. The last 2 measures of this transition feature the harmony deflating from consonance to dissonance with each rising bass note. The second melodic phrase, alone from its counterparts, starts in the middle register on a tritone B flat above the new bass note E natural. The melody presently resolves to a surprise major 3rd G sharp, reflected also in the bass line. But this major scale is quickly darkened by exotic notes F natural and C natural. This phrase is brief, for it hasn't long to fall before it too joins with the bass line. The conclusion of this segment features a surprisingly juicy chord with an even juicier addition above. The complete sound is most easily understood as E minor plus E flat major, a harmony found in a melodic version way back in the Fish People. The musical cherry on top starts with the notes of E flat major, but decays by a half step, creating a very thick, tension-filled harmony of 2 sets of 3 chromatic half steps. This kind of harmony proves to me that it was now easier for synthesizers to create the kind of chord structures that Simpson used before that time. Dense harmonies such as this were simply not practical just a year before. Without pause, we switch gears for the buoyant music from the Time Monster. The turn is signaled by a ringing high D, this time as an octave, above an A augmented chord, the dominant, which will lead us back to the tonic D major. This segment distinguishes itself from the 3 Doctors' music via a richer texture, highlighted by the keyboard accompaniment underneath a synthesizer and vibraphone melody, while the right hand negotiates the fluttering, if more compact, melody. The entire accompaniment, probably played by 2 hands in the original, is played by the left hand alone in my arrangement. The accompaniment is made of a regular 1-bar pattern that alternates 2 harmonies in the D Mixolydian mode, D major and A minor 7. Each chord has added color notes, the 9th for D major and the 11th for A minor 7. These harmonies require either a stretch of the thumb across 2 keys or a rapid flip of the fingers over the thumb. Not so easy to maintain at this speedy tempo. The melody returns to its pentatonic character, but is notably shorter, dropping only 2 octaves before settling on middle D. There is a brief transition between the 2 phrases, pausing the rhythm with a held D7 chord, then effortlessly rising up a half step to welcome a new phrase in E-flat pentatonic. The new accompanying harmony is the same rhythm but different colors, E-flat dominant 7th alternating with B-flat dominant 9th. again involving stretching the thumb across 2 notes. This melody quickly flutters down to E flat, but just as quickly flutters back up again and doesn't stop there. And as the phrase ends, the piece transitions back into D major via a 2 minor 5 progression that steers us to the original Mixolydian mode. As the melody ends on a high C, nearly as high as it started, the piece pulls back in dynamics, and despite the continued insistence of the accompaniment, the melody takes a back seat to the dialogue. This change in dramatic focus is a great example of how Simpson's compositional style changed once he knew for what scenes he was writing music. While the focus is on the car puttering down the road, the music has the spotlight. As we focus in further on the dialogue between the Doctor and Joe, the melody becomes more sparse, with longer notes and simpler rhythm. This means, of course, that the music is mixed further in the background, which means that elements of the accompaniment are covered up by dialogue and the noise of the motor. This is particularly true in the 4 bars where there is an evident harmonic change up to F major. I interpolated the accompaniment based not only on the previous examples, but also what would minimize any mechanical difficulties. After this brief F major tunnel, we emerge back into the brightness of D major, as the melody harmonizes between synthesizer and vibraphone before joining and coming to rest. The accompaniment merrily rolls along briefly, and in preparation for the final sounds, I can at last split the accompaniment into 2 hands for 1 measure. The music hits the brakes on a surprise E major 6 chord. And in the program, this final chord is emphasized with the rattling from a percussion instrument called a vibraslap. I have imitated percussion instruments in my arrangements before and decided, just for fun, this piece would be no exception. Impossible as it is to mimic this non-pitched instrument on piano, I could at least pay homage to it as an answer to the final chord, with a hint of E major amongst a percussive rattle. Thanks for coming with me through this road trip of episode 21, part 2 of the Dudley Simpson is Doctor Who project. A new piece next time. Subscribe, like, share, and comment. See you then.